What's going on, everybody? Today on the Fantasy Life Show, we are previewing all things about the New York Football Giants ahead of 2025, including if Malik Nabers should be drafted as a top 5 wide receiver, what running back to target in this muddled backfield, and whether or not rookie Jaxson Dart is worthy of a late round fantasy. Wait for it, Dart, that's right. So again, tune in. Get ready. We're going to have a great show. And by we, I mean myself and none other than Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, Dwain, the Rock McFarland. And Dwain, let's start with the star of the show, of the franchise, of the freaking city, Malik Nabers himself, coming off a rookie season that saw him average 18.2 PPR points per game. Good for the third most by a rookie in NFL history, behind only Odell Beckham Jr. and Randy Moss. So again, everyone's going to have this dude ranked, I think, at worst, like as a wide receiver 8 overall. But why should he not be in the top 5 after what we saw him do last year? And yeah, not a very good situation.
Yeah, I mean, look, the only thing holding back Malik Nabers is not Malik Nabers. He has got the talent profile. He's got everything that we want. We just have a little bit of a question, right, around what is this Giants offense going to look like? We're hoping it gets better. We've got Russell Wilson there. You also draft Jaxson Dart, so maybe he can take over the offense by some point in the year. But that's the big challenge, Ian. It's just the fact that, like, look, Russell Wilson has not been good to fantasy wide receivers for the last 3 or 4 years. Like, there was a time period where Russell Wilson was very good to fantasy wide receivers, and we saw him do that in Seattle. It's just not been the case here over these last few years. Yeah, Jerry Jeudy had a nice little stretch. George Pickens even last year had a nice little stretch, but we've never been able to have the consistency. And so I think that's the big concern here with Malik Nabers. Now, having said all that, we trust Malik Nabers' talent profile so much that we're still willing, to your point, to take him as a wide receiver in the first round of fantasy drafts. And I do agree, like, it's really hard, like, to get him. There's not really a way to get him outside your top 12 wide receivers. And I don't think there's a way to really get him outside of round 1 of your fantasy drafts. He is just that good. I'm not going to give every number, but it doesn't matter. Targets per route run, yards per route run, PFF receiving grade, like every underlying data point that we go to look at, in addition to fantasy points, which is the actual most sticky thing year over year when you're trying to predict next year's performance, everything lines up for this guy. The only question is his situation. I will say this, like, I would be most intrigued by a storyline that the run out was Jaxson Dart somehow just like blows everybody away in training camp and wins the starting job right away. Because I do feel like we've seen enough of Russell Wilson the last 2 years to say, okay, might you get some good games here and there? Yes, but is truly unlocking like the ultimate ceiling for Malik Nabers. I think that is probably through Jaxson Dart surprising everyone and not being this gimmicky passer that a lot of people, I don't want to say everybody calls him gimmicky. Let's just be honest. Like, when you play in the Ole Miss offense, like, there's a lot of wide open people. Like, you take, you can count it against him, but at the same time, like, what's he supposed to do? There's guys running wide open, so he threw it to him. I mean, so you can't, it's also like to overly count it against him, but it does create a question mark. Like, can Jaxson Dart actually succeed at the next level where we know those sort of things don't happen as often? But again, that's the storyline I would be looking for, Ian, is that Jaxson Dart is just so impressive in training camp that he's going to start in week 1.
We did see Nabers have a change in performance relative to the quarterback. Okay, it was still high level pretty much regardless, but 2 games with Tommy DeVito and Tim Boyle averaged 73 receiving yards per game. 8 games with Daniel Jones, he was up to 76, and 5 games with Drew Lock, he was all the way up there at 90.2. So again, if you're averaging north of 90 receiving yards per game with Drew Lock under center, God forbid Jaxson Dart, winds up being worthy of that round 1 treatment. And honestly, just based on what we've seen, even in recent history, I will give Russell Wilson, the edge there in that group. Certainly saying a lot relative to some of those names I just listed. But with Nabers, again, a situation where I currently have him ranked, Dwain, as my wide receiver 6, the only guys I have in front of him: Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Nico Collins, and Puka Nacua. I think wide receiver 4 would be reasonable. It just kind of comes down to, one, I think in Los Angeles with Puka and Stafford and Sean McVay, they designed so many targets for this dude, but we're going to have to get into, like, okay, can he get open, this or that? Obviously he can. But again, just we've seen that. Puka has some of the best advanced measures out there. Like, okay, go ahead and just give me the more sure thing there. And then with Nico, that one's close, but I'm just more confident in CJ Stroud than some of these other guys we're going to see slinging the football. So you have him just a spot lower, wide receiver 7. I believe you have Brian Thomas Jr. ahead there. Situation where, again, we're talking about such great wide receivers all around. You know, it feels silly to go too deep into why we prefer one over the other because we like all of them. But I think the one point you said where, for sure, a first-round wide receiver, we should all be able to agree on that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the thing ultimately just keeping him from climbing higher is we're in a really good situation right now as fantasy players where round 1 is loaded with not just good players, but good players mostly in their prime. We're seeing Christian McCaffrey make the climb to the middle of round 1. He was started off as an early round 2 pick, Ian. I'm certainly glad I got a little bit of the CMC bags filled up whenever he was at that price tag versus where he's going now. But we're just in a situation where, like, we've got a lot of really good players that are in a good spot in their career. So when you have something like that, it's going to be a situation where a lot of the things we normally lean into to create tiebreakers, like a player's age and are they ascending or descending, we can't use those as tiebreakers here. Now, the tiebreaker we have is the one we've talked about. It's the quality of the offense. It's like you said, like, is the Texans offense like guaranteed to be great? No, it had its problems last year. And, PFF Bobby, as they like to call him, got ran out of town. But at the same time, we have seen one really good year from CJ Stroud. So we at least know that we have that. And so I do have Nico Collins one spot ahead. As much as I've bagged on Trevor Lawrence over the years, like, he has shown he can support fantasy, contributors. I know he didn't necessarily do it with Brian Thomas last year. That came from Mac Jones ironically enough. But when I look at Trevor Lawrence, I'm like, I still feel better about that than Russell Wilson and Jaxson Dart. So it's just small little tiebreakers. And to your point, you did the research, right, around like the offense and the points scored by the offense. And some of this does come down to the quality of quarterbacks. Like, you don't have to worry about it quite as much at wide receiver, especially if you're playing in a full PPR, because so much of the scoring just comes from getting the touches, getting the receptions where you get the automatic points. At running back, unless you're one of the few that catches a lot of balls, like, so much of your production really does come down to touchdowns, and your ceiling comes down to touchdowns. And so at wide receiver, we can see guys like Malik Nabers not score 12 receiving touchdowns and still come up with a top 5 wide receiver year where he catches 100 balls, and goes for 1,200 yards, and he's still going to be able to get there. So obviously, scoring format matters. In standard leagues, the touchdowns then become a little bit more important again. I don't know if you had a chance to run those numbers against standard, but yes, Malik Nabers locked into round 1. I wouldn't really argue with anyone that wanted to move him up a little bit or a little bit down from where we have him. But I am with you. I think the line where I couldn't go past would be there's no way I could get Drake London above him, right? Once you get to Drake London, Matt McConkey, A.J. Brown, all guys we like, those are not guys that I'm going to put ahead of Malik Nabers.
Research Dwain was referencing. I was actually doing a little bit of kicker research, Dwain. I think the first time I've been able to say that in my entire year of pretty funny. Yeah, I'm doing all these team previews, and my 5th question I like to leave out there. So yeah, anyway, I was looking at, again, like, could actually, like, kickers on more mediocre offenses be better than really great ones? Because then theoretically they're moving down the field, but their teams are settling for field goals. Yes, but then actually probably the more actionable takeaway that came out of this was the fact that wide receivers really haven't needed to be on as good a scoring offenses as quarterbacks and running backs. The correlations for, again, top 6 PPR performers versus their team's offensive scoring rank, just in terms of points per game. Quarterback plus 0.6, again, a scale 0 to 1. That's a very strong correlation. Running back plus 0.43. Wide receiver, Dwain, 0.1, 0.12, man. Like, that's small. That's honestly like approaching just noisy territory where we shouldn't even care about it virtually at all. So for Malik Nabers, again, be a lot cooler if it wasn't an offense that is ranked 30th or worse in scoring in 4 of the last 5 years. But again, have at least seen some flashes from Brian Dable. Given Russ, given Dart, there is reason to believe that maybe year 2 could somehow be even better than that rookie campaign. But there are 2 more wide receivers, Dwayne, I do think are worth talking about here for the New York Football Giants. One, Dale Robinson. He caught 93 passes on 140 targets last year, okay? That happened. Now, there have been 270 instances, Dwayne, of a wide receiver catching at least 90 passes in a season in NFL history. Wandale is the only one to average under 50 receiving yards per game, and he was at 41, okay? I like making my, NFL primetime music highlight films for these guys. I tortured myself and made myself watch all 93 of Wandale's catches. I couldn't do it, man. People would have made fun of the guy. There were no highlights to be found hardly. It's like every single time Wandale catches a pass, it might as well be 3rd and goal from the 3-yard line, but in reality, it's 2nd and 10 from midfield, and this guy's, catching a 3-yard pivot out here. So we have Wandale doing that. We also have Darius Slayton, who hilariously is my most drafted wide receiver of this offseason. What could go wrong there? Got that 3-year, $36 million extension. I just think he's for sure going to be in 3 wide receiver sets. He's regularly available in the final 2 or 3 rounds. And man, you want to talk about a potential match made in, I think heaven's probably a stretch, a match made in, a poor person's version of heaven. That could be Slayton catching those moon balls from Russell Wilson. Okay. So that atrocious metaphor aside, I really do like Darius Slayton as my late round dart. I have not been going out of my way for Wandale, but where do you fall in these other 2 Giants wide receivers?
I'm with you. I mean, all people can get to heaven, Ian, poor or
yes.
rich. But yes, if we're looking at these 2 wide receivers, I do agree with, like, from an archetype standpoint, Darius Slayton's the guy that matches up with what we would see from Russell Wilson and where some of the value can be had, pushing the ball further down the field, catching some of these deep bombs, scoring some touchdowns, things like that. I don't want to completely dismiss Wandale. I am with you. I didn't go back and watch every one of these plays. Like, that's just too brutal. So hat tip to you for going ahead and taking the hit for the team there. But I mean, I think that Wandale, if he was in a better, offense that had a higher ceiling as far as passing yards, I know the touchdowns haven't made as big of a difference, but like if he played on a team that was throwing for 300 yards per game, like, and he was the slot wide receiver for Joe Burrow, like, we might be a little bit more excited. But playing on the team that we're talking about, where we definitely know that there's going to be a yardage ceiling here, unless Jaxson Dart, again, all roads come back to Jaxson Dart being this breakout kind of player, which is, honestly, like, we can't count on that. It's going to be tough, for Wandale. So I am with you, especially as long as Russell Wilson is under center. I would be leaning towards Darius Slayton. But enough about these wide receivers. Are you sure you don't have a 4th wide receiver you want to talk about for the Giants? Okay.
I think I'm good, Dwain. I think I'm good.
we do actually have a position on this team where we could have a breakout. You guys know what that means. It's time for the Breakout Watch, presented by none other than Bud Light. And Ian, we've got Tyrone Tracy. We've got Cam Skattebo. These 2 guys are really battling out. The 2 similar profiles, actually. 2 guys that technically could play all the downs. Tracy was more of a receiver in college. Skattebo, if you look at him in the rookie supermodel, one of the most productive guys we've seen. Some other things not as great about him, but very productive player. Has a potential 3-down skill set. Which way are you leaning? These guys are going right next to each other right now in fantasy drafts.
I have been leaning more towards Tyrone Tracy so far. I mean, look, it wasn't a picture-perfect rookie season by any stretch. We actually saw Tracy have 12 combined drops and fumbles. Only Breece Hall had more. And unfortunately, on several occasions, actually, we did see that ball security actually become a very big issue with his job security. Devin Singletary replacing him for portions of the games. But Giants did go back to him. And again, this is still a guy where you can have the wide receiver convert, talk and message, and that kind of adds credence to that idea that he's still learning his way, around the position. So more slack could be given. And look, Cam Skattebo, I know, shout out Arizona State, Kendall Valenzuela's #1 favorite drafted player this year and everything. But I just do think, man, Tracy was a day 3 guy as well, but that doesn't necessarily make all of a sudden trusting the newest one a great, just solution in my opinion. So Tracy's been the one inside this offense who took over the starting job last year. I just think he deserves the benefit of the doubt, which really I don't think is a controversial thing to say. But when you do start looking at the ADP difference, Dwain, we are seeing again Skattebo be someone who is going just a little bit ahead of Tracy right now. So for me, it's very close, but give me the guy who's incumbent who should be getting that first snap of the season. What say you?
I like both of these guys, to be honest, and I think it is really hard to say who is going to win the job or are they just going to end up splitting it. But there's contingent upside with both of them because they can both play passing downs. When you look at Skattebo, the big thing with his profile, I talked about it, was his production in college. He had an 86 production rating, and going back to 2017 in the supermodel, Ian, that is the 7th best mark. Okay, if you look at his film rating, it came out as an 85, also one of the top 10 marks marks in the history of the rookie supermodel. So you get those two things coming together, like that's pretty good. Like the production was good. The film folks loved it. PFF receiving and rushing grades were also really high. That's part of that film rating for the running back group. So when you look at his historical comps, to your point, once you add in the draft capital going at the beginning of round 4, it's not like we have these huge hit rates, but there are plenty of good hits in there. And he does have the profile where if something did happen, Tracy was off the field, I think you and I both agree, like he could handle the carries inside the 5-yard line and he could stay out there in the 2-minute offense. And if you have anyone that can check those two boxes, those are high leverage opportunities in fantasy football. 2-minute offense matters a lot, especially for a team projected with a low win total like the Giants that could be trailing quite often. You want to have the backs that can catch those passes whenever the defense decides, all right, we're already kicking your butt and we're not worried about it. We're just going to go to this shell coverage and we're not going to give away anything deep. Oh, who am I kidding? Like I'm talking about defensive coverage like every play nowadays in the NFL. But whenever you look at Skattebo, he's totally capable of that. Tyrone Tracy also capable. So I've kind of been letting drafts just sort it out for me. I've taken Tracy plenty of times. I've taken Skattebo plenty of times. But I think if you're sitting here having to pick between the two, I get where you're coming from. Like it's like, okay, why would we not just give it to the incumbent who's already proven? I think that's probably fair, but I think it's also pretty close between the two. If I had to choose though, and I get one team and it's like, which one do I think is going to win the role at least early in the year? I would lean with you to Tracy, but they're really close for me. And I've just basically been letting drafters, handle it for me, and whichever one's left, then I take them because I think both of them have very interesting profiles. If it happens to work out and they run pure and either one of them runs into like an every down workload.
They are going at the spot in the draft where, I do want to start getting my, hopefully at that point, third or fourth running back, because we're talking about the top 55 plus wide receivers being gone, the top 6 tight ends, even the top 10 quarterbacks. So as we've kind of been discussing throughout this offseason and into our team preview series, like the quarterbacks and tight ends, like, yes, there certainly is a top tier where if you can get, them in the first couple of rounds, more power to you. But I have been inclined to wait and just draft, multiple guys at those positions in the later rounds. I don't quite see the need to go as hard in the paint in the middle rounds. These running backs, though, this is the last point. We got the Brian Robinsons, the Jalen Warrens of the world, and now these Giants running backs, Travis Etienne, the Jaguars, are out there too. Also the Cowboys, who we talked about. So there's a couple of situations, but really, man, like this is the part in the draft where you're all of a sudden, you go to pure handcuff territory in a hurry here. So yes, I understand, like there is a scenario where both these guys stay healthy. The Giants offense isn't all that much to write home about, and we aren't seeing, breakouts happening, but that's kind of where they're being drafted at right now. That's what their price is telling us. So the potential to see these guys take a big role, which we have seen Brian Daboll be willing to do. In fact, Tracy, 60% plus snaps in each of the final 6 games of last season. That's not a bad ceiling to be buying at, again, a cost that's going outside the top 100 overall picks.
Yeah, and again, I think the big takeaway here, final point on it, and we've really already mentioned it, is if you get into these ambiguous situations, we're looking at the talent profiles, and these are both guys, Ian, that have a 3-down skill set. Will it work out that way? We don't know. But there's a lot of running backs that are going after them in our fantasy drafts that don't offer the 3-down skill set. So I think good call by you on the way this could potentially work out. And this has been our Breakout Watch, guys, presented by none other than Bud Light. And let's talk a little Bud Light here. Okay, fantasy football fans, sure, the NFL season may be long over, but next season's action is already well underway. We're talking big trades, new signings, draft order shuffles, you name it. And all this preseason NFL action is easier to enjoy with the official beer of the NFL. So get Bud Light delivered today and enjoy every season projection, every player trade, every coaching change, and draft pick with the clean, crisp taste of Bud Light, the official beer of the NFL. Stock up now for the offseason and enjoy. Bud Light, easy to drink and easy to enjoy.
Pretty rare that we get through one of these team previews and don't talk about the quarterback in the beginning, but this is the New York Giants for you. So let's go ahead and get into this. Maybe competition between Russell Wilson and Jaxson Dart, albeit it does seem like Dangerous will be the guy to start. Okay, so just a 1-year, $10.5 million deal, but just based on everything we've heard from the Giants, really since the second they drafted Dart, it does seem like they would like for Russ to go ahead and start this season. But my God, Dwain, again, I'm not someone who really puts that much stock into some of these schedules that we get, looking out. But for the Giants, it could be a situation where, let's face it, a lot of schedules, they probably wouldn't be winning too many football games. But man, at the Commanders, at the Cowboys, Chiefs, Chargers, at the Saints, Eagles, Broncos, Eagles, 49ers, Bears, Packers, Lions, those are the first 12 games, man. They're probably going to be favored against the Saints, and that very well might be it. So it does seem like a matter of if, or I should say when, not if, we do see Dart under center. So with all due respect to Russ, who again has that moonball going still, he was actually number one in a PFF grade, and I believe passer rating when throwing the ball at least 20 yards downfield. I think Russ is still a top 25 to 30 quarterback on the planet, okay? But as we see, that is usually not long enough to keep your job. So when we do see Jaxson Dart here under center, what kind of upside do you think he brings us, particularly to fantasy football?
Man, I think it's a great ceiling. What he did in college as a scrambler, as well as getting involved in the design run game, he really did both. Now, he averaged, if you take away sacks, that's that pesky thing, guys, when we go look at the rushing yards, in college, you got the sacks taken away. So once you get rid of that and think about it like a normal NFL terms, averaged over 40 rushing yards per game. So I gave him 31 in the projections here across, his design run attempts and a decent scramble rate. And you know what that does, Ian? When you start getting quarterbacks that you're projecting around 30 rushing yards, well, what's his ceiling? 43 rushing yards per game in the ceiling model. And then if you look at him, I gave him 222 passing yards per game, but there's a ceiling of 246. Now there's a floor of 197. Jaxson Dart might not be a very good passer. Like, we don't know for sure yet. But the thing that usually is pretty sticky is that ability as a rusher. We saw it last year with Drake May. We saw it with Jaden Daniels. It just continually seems to play out in favor of being an edge that we can lean into. And so Dart's not going to be confused for being, one of these elite dual threat guys, but he's kind of in that range of where Drake May was. And so when you look at that ceiling, Ian, and our ceiling and floor projection model, 23.1 fantasy points per game. It's the 12th best. It's sitting right there with Caleb Williams, sitting right there above Trevor Lawrence, slightly above Brock Purdy. Again, we're not saying it's all going to run out that way. It would take a really pure run out for Jaxson Dart, but because he has that ability as a rusher, there is something to be had there. And again, that's the other reason I would be excited about Jaxson Dart taking over sooner rather than later. It's just another thing that defenses have to worry about within the Giants' game plan. That can open up other things for guys like Malik Nabers and some of the running backs that we just talked about. Who knows, maybe even a Wan'Dale Robinson, and Ian won't have to hate on him so much. So I really do like Jaxson Dart if we ever get to the point that we hear that he's going to be the starter. Until we hear it, Ian, probably not a guy most people are going to be drafting and play. If you play in like a 20-round draft, right, and you know that all your league mates are drafting two quarterbacks, maybe in that scenario, you don't like your starter, you're stashing Jaxson Dart, right, as your QB2. But for the most part, this is going to be a guy that we're going to be watching for on the waiver wire very early in the season. And if Russ, we hear, is getting benched in week 3, you're going to hear Ian and I talking a lot about Jaxson Dart. So this is just kind of laying the groundwork for it. And it all comes back to that rushing ability. There's going to be some nice upside here with Dart, who will get Malik Nabers as his top passing target. So I do think there's some things here to get excited about. Just got to wait and see if he can get the job.
And look, with Brian Daboll being someone who we have seen help quarterbacks rack up production on the ground. I'm not talking about Josh Allen, okay? Josh Allen's first start against the Vikings, he was hurdling dudes, his second drive out there on the field. I think Josh Allen was going to be just fine running the football, even if he never met Brian Daboll. But you look at Daniel Jones, man, first 3 years of his career, 21, 30, 27 rushing yards per game. First year at Brian Daboll, man, spiked all the way up to 44. This dude has a 700-yard rushing season to his name. And again, I wouldn't say Daniel Jones is like a different level athlete than Jaxson Dart, with all due respect to the artist known as Vanilla Vic. So I'm with you. I've been going out of my way to, get Dart even at the end of drafts. I do think it's a situation where he could be on the bench for 10 plus games. But man, once we do start getting into those bye weeks in week 13, week 14, maybe finally we do get a matchup against the Patriots there down the line. Perhaps Dart, again, could be one of these quarterbacks we see fairly often, better in fantasy land, even while they still have some catching up to do in real life. So I will say, Dwain, I know you're in a couple of dynasty leagues. There has been some disrespect going towards Dart, in terms of even just super flex formats, where it's pretty rare that you see first round quarterbacks dropping as much as him in drafts. I mean, God forbid you can get this dude at the end of round 1 or even in the early parts of round 2. Just give me the first round rookie quarterback, because there's a good chance their value is going to stay pretty high.
Yes, he should go in super flex drafts. He should be going at the end of round one, especially given this potential dual threat scenario that we're talking about. Like last year, dude, we saw the same thing happen with Bo Nix, and he had kind of a similar rushing profile. And Bo Nix comes out and has a really good fantasy season. He was decent as a passer, but honestly, it's what he did as a rusher that really pushes him up. It gives you a good floor. So let Bo Nix be a really good example. And in the first part of a round two. Last year, Ian, in one of my rookie drafts, tight end premium, I took Ben Sinnott when I could have taken Bo Nix. So I'm a complete moron, right? Like that really hurts at this point. Now, again, it was tight end premium, so there's a reason that I leaned to Sinnott. But man, it's also a super flex league. So I mean, I was torn between the two guys, made the wrong choice. Obviously, the Bo Nix drafter took him right after I took Sinnott, laughing all the way to the bank, as they say.
These types of dynasty decisions keep us up at night, but that doesn't stop us from getting back in those streets. Always a fun time in dynasty land. So last point I wanted to talk about with the Giants, someone who, again, isn't going to be on the top of your draft list necessarily, but want to cover our bases with tight end Theo Johnson, a.k.a. the man responsible for making Tyler Warren's career at Penn State not quite as prolific as it maybe could have been until his obvious breakout 2024 season. So with Theo Johnson, Dwain, we saw him go out there and really command an every down role last year, albeit wasn't getting a ton of targets for his troubles. And then obviously, had some injuries to deal with as well. But with Theo, again, not saying relative athletic score or RAS score is the most predictive thing in football. In fact, it's not very predictive at all, as Dwain has, told me over the years. But, I still will take guys who are freak athletes over guys who are not as athletic. And just based on these scores, man, we're talking about the number 2 ranked tight end in the freaking database that goes all the way back to 1987. So didn't see, too meaningful competition added to this room. Talking about guys, like Thomas Fedone coming in as a 7th rounder. We got Daniel Bellinger and Chris Manhurst. So it should be the Theo Johnson show, if you want to call it that again. Is that enough to get you excited in the very late rounds of fantasy drafts?
Well, he really didn't take over that full-time role until about week 5. He had split some time with Daniel Bellinger. They kind of had a little bit of a rotation going. But once he got there, route participations of 80, 88, 79, 76, 86. He had a 63 in week 12, week 13 at 86, and then he ultimately gets injured and the season is over. But if you look at those games, like there's some nice little spike performances. In week 9, he had a 24% target share, got you 14.1 fantasy points in a PPR, a 20% target share in week 12. So I know I'm kind of cherry picking these things here, but sometimes as a rookie for tight ends, guys, I get it. We're spoiled. Sam Laporta, Brock Bowers. It feels like every rookie tight end breaks out. No, they don't. Think about Dalton Kincaid and what we're dealing with Dalton Kincaid. Still hasn't happened for a player. So it can be tough for these guys to break out early. And Theo Johnson, I think, did flash enough that you could call him one of these sleeper tight ends. Is he a guy that we're prioritizing in drafts? No. But to your point, Ian, if there's a guy that can earn some targets and they are also an athlete, I'm with you. As much as I don't think some of these things are super predictive of future fantasy points, it still makes sense that if we have guys that can earn a few targets, we want them to be really good athletes, right? And we want them to be able to do things after the catch. So with Theo Johnson, I would say he is one of these tight end sleepers. If you're playing, in best ball, he is one of these guys I'm willing to take like in a 3 tight end build, right? And sometimes I have him a few times as my tight end too. Like if I've got a Trey McBride or a Brock Bowers, somebody like that up top, and then I'm coming back and I'm not as worried about having 3 tight ends. So I do think that Theo Johnson is draftable in your best ball formats.
He's in that range. I will say I've been a little partial to Juwan Johnson myself. Just got that $30 million extension and just a situation where I don't want to call it better than the Giants, but, 2 pretty bad offenses. We just seen a little bit more from Juwan throughout his career. Also, Mike Gesicki going a little bit earlier, but Chigga Conquo, Dalton Schultz, more guys in that just, again, real down and out range that maybe I've sided with a little bit more. Theo versus Juwan. Jane, where are you on that one?
I'm going Theo just because I think he has a better chance to be like an 80% route participation player. Okay. And, maybe there's a path to Jaxson Dart actually being good. I'm really rough on Tyler Shuck. I have a hard time believing like that he's going to be this really good NFL quarterback given the age and just what happened through the course of his college career. Now, there's a lot of film people that like him, so I could be wrong on it. But to your point, two offenses we don't really love. I kind of lean to the guy I think that could play a little bit more, but it could easily be wrong, Ian. Like I will say Jaxson Johnson has proven himself to be a slightly better target earner to this point in his career versus what we've seen with Theo Johnson.
Takes us to our win total. This one is resting at a lowly 5.5, and I'm going to go under here. I can't take over for every single team in the division as much as I would like to appease, all you fans out there. But I will say, man, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, this defensive line is deep. And I do think they have the potential to win a couple of games. But, man, it's just such a tough schedule. I do think that, again, putting all of our eggs in the basket of, like, these 2022 Giants, and, yeah, that was great. They won a playoff game. But that still wasn't exactly this world-beating offense. We're kind of pointing back saying, oh, look, they finished 15th in scoring one of these years, not, dead last or 30th in the league. So, again, still a few too many question marks with the overall offense. We could see Jaxson Dart have a great NFL career, but still not be great in this environment. So give me under 5.5 wins, but wouldn't be putting the mortgage on this one, I will say, just because, again, I would not be surprised if this defense is going to surprise some people. So what say you, Mr. McFarland?
I'm going to go with the over. At 5.5, I think they can get to 6. So in 2022, they won 9 games, won 6 games in 2023, only won 3 last year. But, man, just massive quarterback injuries. The quarterback room was completely destroyed. It's not like they started off in a great spot with Daniel Jones, but he was at least functional, Ian. So I'm with you, man. I just look at this defense and I'm like, man, if this front seven stays healthy, like, there is a real chance to create havoc for opposing quarterbacks, just opposing offenses overall. And I think that's a recipe where we could see it get to 6-7 wins. To your point, also, even though I'm taking the over, I'm not putting the mortgage on it. This is one that I think the line, it's probably about right where it's set, but give me the over since I took the under on the Commanders.
There could be something to be said, too, about their performance in one-score games. Just 1-8 last season in games that were decided by 8 or fewer points. So give me the over, Dwain. I'm taking the over for all these NFC East teams. All right, screw unders out here. It's 2025 after all. So let's get out of this edition of the Fantasy Life Show, though. AFC East team previews up next. Make sure you check those out. But for now, just have a great rest of your day. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.